Hello everybody and welcome to the Publishing Informant Show. Today I'm super excited to be interviewing Leslie Lefebvre, who's not only a massive name in the self-publishing world, but he's also an author, and he's one of the people that helped set up the Kobo publishing system to enable people to publish their books on Kobo as well. Now, Kobo is kind of like a competitor to Kindle. You've probably heard of it. You might have seen it in WH Smith or in other bookstores or in the airport, but it's actually a really good platform, and it's bigger in some countries than Kindle is. So it's not a platform that you should be ignoring. In this session today, we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into exactly how you can get going with Kobo, some tips and tricks for how you can make your book stand out, and much, much more. So enjoy the show, and hopefully we'll speak soon. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Publishing Informant Show. I'm here with Leslie Lefebvre, who is an author, a book industry representative, and also just an all-round book nerd. He said that, not me. So we can welcome Mark to the show.
Hey Teddy, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate you spending your time here. Did you always want to be a writer?
I wanted to be a stuntman. I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to be an astronaut, like all those things. But it was probably in my early teens that I recognized my love of creativity. Started off with little doodles, little stick figure cartoons that I would write.
Yeah.
And then it was probably around the age of 13, 14 that I first discovered typewriter in the back of my mom's closet under a dust cover. And I just remember, because I did like story and telling the story, and I remember using the typewriter to do, I did a full page of words that I typed.
Is this like a manual one, like a clicky clacky?
Yeah, manual Underwood typewriter, and it was just so like my little fingers, right? Because I was a little skinny guy and I had to really lean into it. And by the time I was 15, I'd actually written my, started writing stories. I had submitted my first story for a contest, CBC Radio, kind of like BBC, but Canadian. So that sort of quality. And I realized they're not going to want a horror story. They definitely let me know they did not want my horror story. So that was my first rejection. So I've kind of knew I wanted to be a writer from my early teens, and I started taking it seriously around the age of 14, 15.
Right, okay. And have you still got that first story that you sold?
The first story that got rejected, yeah, and the first one that I sold wasn't until 1992. So I'd started in the I guess early mid 80s, and then my first published work wasn't until 92. So years and years of constant rejections. So I have
amazing.
Yes, I have folders filled with. I still have the notes and all the things, and most of the rejections that I received too.
I spoke to Kevin J. Anderson last week, and he said he was threatening to release his first story one day, but
and he read it. He read the first story at the master's program in Western in July this summer to the audience, just so they could see that. And I think he wrote that when he was 14 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, amazing. Now we'll start with your fiction books. So your fiction books are mostly in sort of the horror category, aren't they? So
yeah,
was it always horror you wanted to write about?
Yeah, I was a skinny little kid, afraid of everything, afraid of the dark, afraid of the monster under my bed and the one in my closet, though. Definitely there was one under the stairs, so when you come running upstairs, you had to go really fast so the monster didn't grab you. And I think my imagination always went to the dark places. It always wanted to know, well, I can't see what's in that dark corner. What if there's something there?
Yeah.
and so I started to explore that. And I remember my mom saying, Mark, why can't you write a nice story? She read Harlequin romances. That was her fix, right? Like she read like a book or two a day, and she loved that genre. But it was, I was always drawn to the dark side for some reason. No, I mean, most of the stuff that I write now, it's funny. I haven't really gotten back into horror because over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been writing an urban fantasy series. And that's been taking a lot of my fictional time. Every once in a while, I'll stick a horror fiction short story. But I'm just in the process of re-releasing the first book I ever published, One Hand Screaming. I've got like a triple-sized expanded edition, 20-year anniversary version of it. And it's been so fun to dig back into my horror. Because just for that one, I'm only using my horror pieces, not the other short fiction that's more speculative and general in nature.
Right, okay. And this is all in the Canadian Werewolf series?
Well, the Canadian Werewolf series is the urban fantasy series. And again, it's not It's kind of funny. I was talking to someone at a horror con I was at this weekend, and I said, "Well, it's not really horror. It's humorous urban fantasy because it's kind of funny that the guy wakes up naked with a bullet in his leg and the taste of blood in his mouth, and he has no idea what's happening, and he's trying desperately to because he lives in Manhattan, trying desperately to scramble to find any discarded clothing." So he's naked, and it's embarrassing. And he's more of a superhero because he has enhanced powers. So I was like, "But it's not really horror." He's like, "Yeah, well, the guy's a well, he turns into a wolf." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not like this dangerous werewolf, half man, half human that goes around and terrorizes people." Calling it horror, I mean, calling it horror because there's a werewolf in it, sure. Calling it horror because there's some really nasty bad guys in it,
Yeah.
based on Hitler's desire to create a super race and some of the paranormal stuff. I read an academic text called Hitler's Monsters a few years ago. That
Right.
was
Okay.
800-page academic text about the Third Reich and all of the paranormal stuff they did, all of the mysticism and and it was like, wow, they were really trying to really make werewolves and other creatures like that.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah, it
yeah.
was
So I love the
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. Well, because I love the Second World War, that kind of historical fiction. That's my thing. My favorite sort of genre to read
Yeah,
about.
well, look up the book Hitler's Monsters. It was done by an academic press, so I mean, it's not it's relatively dry in that it's very academic in nature,
Yeah.
and but it really digs into all of the evidence of the various involvement that various people under Hitler were engaged in. Kind of like when you hear about Arthur Conan Doyle and the escape artist. I'm drawing a blank. The most famous escape artist in the world, Houdini.
Houdini.
You know, that they were really involved in sort of paranormal stuff and wanting to do seances and things like that.
Right. Okay.
So it
Yeah.
was, yeah, it was just so fascinating to read. It took me a long time. I think it was I listened to the audiobook, and it's like a 24-hour audiobook or something.
Quite a big commitment.
Yeah.
Do you use a lot of things like that book for inspiration for your writing, or was that kind of a one-off?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I do write true ghost stories, right? I've got Haunted Hospitals, Creepy Capital, which is Ottawa, our nation's capital here in Canada, Haunted Hamilton, etc. Whether I'm doing a nonfiction book for ghost stories or I'm writing fiction, I'm constantly referencing nonfiction texts. So
Yeah.
even in my Canadian werewolf series, okay, so he's a wolf, all right. I mean, I did have to do some research into what kind of wolf I wanted him to be. Like he's a full wolf, and looking at various wolf legends and stuff like that from around the world, but then even locations and various people he encounters who have a profession and would know something about this thing that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly doing research, whether it's for a nonfiction book or it's for fiction,
Yeah.
because even I mean, even one of my horror stories, The Exquisite Taste of a Book-Aged Skull, is I understand beer because I'm a big craft beer advocate. And so, barrel aged beer and stuff like that, and the process. I've gone on beer tours and learned a little bit about it. But when I was writing a story about that, where someone's using a skull in a similar way to soak up the knowledge, the leftover remnants, like the remnants of the bourbon, into the beer, I went and actually read more about the process and how it works and why they do that and why they keep these, bourbon barrels or whatever, the various liquor barrels
Yeah.
and wine and stuff like that. So yeah, so even in a fun, goofy horror story, there's still some research involved.
Yeah. I think you can really tell in the characters when you read books where the research has been done. I think like it brings so much more color to the whole story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, with do you have a particular approach to writing? Like, do you have a way of structuring your stories, for example, that you use for every book you write?
I mean, roughly, I don't outline when it comes to fiction.
Okay.
When it comes to fiction, I tend to know some of the milestones. I know some of the elements I want. I may
Yeah.
make some notes. I make notes about characters and for sure about
Yeah.
who they are, some of their background and stuff. Whether or not that gets revealed in the story, I have it for myself because it may be pertinent later on because I'm writing a series. I don't outline. So I get up early in the morning, I put on the coffee, I feed the pets, and I try to get my creative stuff done early, right?
Yep.
Between quarter to 6 in the morning and maybe 8 a.m. is when I can get my most creative work done. Now, unless I'm on deadline, if I'm on deadline, that just takes up more of the day. But my other rest of my regular day, the rest of the time is done all the other mechanics around writing. I also, I mean, I consult in the book industry, so I do a lot of that day job
Yeah.
style work where I'm working with other people and helping other writers, or working with Draft to Digital and helping doing stuff for them. In terms of the fiction, nonfiction, it's a lot more structured. So with a nonfiction book, if it's a book about ghost stories of a particular locale, like the terror, haunted bookstores and libraries, I've got like spreadsheet that says, okay, here are the things that the chapters are going to be about, and here's where I need to go get my research. And when I co-author, it's like, okay, this is your chapter, this is my chapter,
Yep.
just like the estimation. So there is a bit of a high level outline. And then even in my books that I write for writers, again, I break it down and I say, okay, usually a spreadsheet, and say, what are the topics I want to cover? And then I can explode them into subsections
Yeah.
of a
Okay.
chapter. And yeah, so it's the nonfiction really demands more of that structure. The fiction, it's, as Dean Wesley Smith says, I'm more writing into the dark with an
Right. Okay.
idea of where I'm going to get to,
Yeah.
hopefully. Sometimes it changes, but for the most part, the end is kind of what I envision, or the end is a natural evolution of what the characters decide while they're in the moment. And
Right.
it's funny, I often just let them decide. It sounds weird, but it's like, I wouldn't do this, but this is what they might do.
Yeah. So if you're doing it that way, do you have to do quite a lot of editing at the end to make sure that what you've decided makes sense? Like the decisions make sense for what the sort of character and what if it's a
Yeah,
sort of
well,
wider
that's
story.
where the developmental part of the editors that I work with, that's where that really comes in. The last project I did fiction wise was really intriguing because this was a self-published title, so I delayed the release and I messed a few things up. And my editor was getting my chapters in this story that I was making up as I was going along every day. At the end of the day, they were on the West Coast. They were three
All
hours
right.
behind me. So every morning I would write the next chapter. They would get it. They would edit, make comments,
Okay.
ask questions, say, well, but and actually help remind me of the things I screwed up because it wasn't outlined.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
every day I did that, and that's how I got that book done, because I needed to get it done to deadline. And it was such a fascinating process because the editor was helping me in the process of me making it up. So based on their reactions to certain things, like, oh, they really like this, I'm going to do more of that. And that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a really unique way to discover something.
That's amazing. I've never even thought about writing a book in that way, where you've got the editor sort of along the sort of journey with you. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah. I
I
did
don't know
that. I
how.
did that a few years ago with a horror novel, I Death, or the first third of the novel. Anyway, I did it on a blog, rolled out
Right.
in real time because it was a journal. Was that epistolary? Is that the word that you use for when it's a journal for form of
I'm not sure.
storytelling? And it was over 9 months, and it was a suicidal teen who thought he had a death curse. Everyone he got close to died. So it's just like this journal blog, and the commenters were commenting in real time. Some people thought he was real, and I had a little disclaimer saying this is fiction. And then once they realized it was fiction, they played along as if he was real,
Right.
and I
Okay. Yeah.
incorporated them into the story. And it was
Yeah.
so much fun because if they liked something, I gave them more of it. It's kind of
Yeah.
like when you're doing improv, and
Yeah. Yeah.
the audience likes what you do, so you give them a little bit more.
Yeah, that's amazing. I spoke to an author called Christina Graves. She's really new last week, but she's really ambitious, and she's a horror writer as well. And she's actually releasing a book in the same way. So she's releasing it via her blog, like, and then the blog gets deleted so that it can then be turned into a book later on. But her true fans can kind of see the book as it's being developed.
Yeah, early. That's such a what a
Yeah,
and that's the power that we have as writers.
yeah,
And when you think about how, even the way because did a lot of theater. When you think about how sometimes some of the plays that we did, okay, we don't change the words very much, but we may change the way the characters and the actors
yeah,
interact, or the facial expressions, because again,
hmm
with one audience that you have, when we were touring a show to different schools for kids, you picked up on the stuff that they really liked, and so you added a little bit more of it the next time you did it.
yeah,
And I remember when we did the same play in front of primarily adult audiences at a fringe festival, it was weird because we were so used to the kids laughing at certain shtick that we did.
yeah,
And the adults didn't laugh at the shtick, but they laughed at it's kind of like the Looney Tunes cartoons where my dad would laugh at different aspects. of Bugs Bunny and Coyote and
Yeah.
Roadrunner than I would as a kid. I was laughing at like the slapstick stuff, and my dad was laughing at the jokes that were obviously for adults. And so
Yeah.
it's so fun when you realize even in the same work, people can appreciate it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I thought it was a really nice idea. Going back to your non-fiction books as well. So a lot of the listeners to this are non-fiction authors, like quite a lot actually. And whenever I do consulting with non-fiction authors, especially if they're doing outlines and they're at that part of the journey, that we kind of try to structure it in a way where it's like you're giving information so that you can then go on and write it, or even get help with a ghostwriter to go and write it. But if you are doing an outline for a non-fiction book, you mentioned it's a bit different to how you would do your fiction one. What level of detail do you go into in your outline before you've written the book?
I'm pretty light in terms of the outline, so I'll take
Yeah,
and I'm a fan of spreadsheets because Google Sheets works great when you're doing it with a co-author, which is critical because you have to know where the other person is. When I don't need to know where I am.
yeah,
I
yeah,
do in nonfiction, but I break it down. I usually start in the first column. It's like the high level theme of what I want to talk about, and then I'll write a line or two in a description over to the right just to see what that chapter is going to be, and then sometimes I'll find subtopics within the topic and
yeah,
feel for the reader, for me as well, I need to break this into 5 chunks, and here are the 5 chunks, and in each chunk I may write a line or two, but that's kind of it. Or sometimes even just the title itself is more descriptive. And it may not be the title I end up using, but it's descriptive. And
yeah,
that usually gives me enough. And then in the process of writing, so the funny part is in the process of writing, that outline is not set in stone, right? It's not written in ink. It is malleable and it's changeable. And so while I'm writing a chapter, I may go, oh, I thought this was a subset of this, but it's really its own chapter. So then I go back to the spreadsheet and I rearrange it. And then the other thing I also do is I estimate what my word count, like, oh, okay, this subsection is going to be 500 words, 500 words, 500 words, 500 words. So this chapter is going to be about 3,000 words in total. Like this introduction is going to be here. This is going to be there. And so it's really funny that even though I start with an outline, by the time I finish the book, or at least the first draft of the book, it's changed. And then after the editor tends to see it and they have questions, their questions may lead me to go, oh, maybe I need to put this here instead of there because I need to clarify this before they
yeah,
get to the other point.
yeah. That makes sense. So if you are doing, because obviously you've got the book The Relaxed Author with Joanna Penn, and which was
Yeah, yeah.
yeah really good book, and I love Joanna Penn's podcast obviously as well. What was it like working with her and that writing
Oh,
process with your outline? Like, was it basically the exact process you just followed?
so no, no, not at all. So that was the most unique book I've ever written. So I mean, Joe and I have been friends for a number of years. You know, we only get together maybe once or twice a year when traveling to the same conferences together. It was
Mhm.
a lot easier when I was going to Europe a lot and I was at London Book Fair and stuff like that. I would see her more frequently, but she's coming this way a lot more lately.
Yep,
And it was the result of I was on her podcast and we were joking about it sounds like it could be a book, The Relaxed Author, and I was joking about putting on like sitting around the house with a robe on and just all relaxed and calm. And it's funny because I'm very high strung, right? So it was
yeah,
just a joke. And then her listener said, "Oh, if you guys wrote that book, we would read it." And then Joe and I, like, there were so many comments that Joe pinged me in an email saying, what do you think? And I said, yeah, cool. But neither one of us had the time because we had already packed our schedules with stuff we wanted to do. And so the way we wrote this book was we got on Zoom. We
yep,
probably did between 6 and 9 hours of Zoom conversations.
yep,
So what Joe is very structured. She's very organized. She loves that. So she did kind of structure, okay, this 2 hour session, we're going to talk about this.
yep,
And so she sort of had some outlines of questions and things like that. And we just talked. And so the first, like, we took about 6 hours of that conversation, sent it to her transcriber, and they transcribed our conversation. And that was our very, 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 very first draft. And then we went in and edited it, and then back and forth, back and forth. And then we moved stuff around because and Joe is such a great project manager. Like, she really She really nails the timeline down in a really incredible structure. So Julie Strauss is an author I've worked with who's also very organized and very structured. I think it's kind of funny because you think we would want to kill each other because I'm so disorganized and they're so organized and they plan ahead. But I mean, I learned through somebody I respect, I learned why this is a good thing. And it actually made me a little bit more organized in my approach. So
Yeah.
so the goodness and the organizational skills of people like Joanna have really rubbed off on me in a really positive way.
That's funny that she's that organized, because in my head she's really, really organized as well. So it's funny that in real life that
Yeah.
it's exactly the same.
Oh no, she's really on top of things as
Yeah.
well. Whereas I just kind of show up and go, okay,
You're a pantser. That's one of the literary terms.
pretty
Yeah.
much seat of my pants. That's kind of how I live my life.
Yeah. I know. Just go back a few minutes. You were talking about your like daily routine. Was that something that you purposefully implemented, or that you learnt from like reading a particular book, or is it just something that just works for you?
Well, I had to do it because writing was important to me,
Yeah.
and my father was a fisherman, so he was up at the crack of dawn. He was the guy who woke up the rooster that woke up the sun, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I inherited that from him, and that's nurture over nature because I was adopted. So I inherited that desire. But it was also such a beautiful time of the day because everyone else is sleeping. You have the whole world to yourself practically, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I had to do it because I was working full time. And if I wanted to get writing done, I needed to make time to write. So it's like, okay, I normally get up at this time and it takes me an hour to get ready for work and I go. If I get up an hour earlier, I can write for an hour, then get ready for work, then go. And so structuring that writing time into my day was good. The other thing about me, because I'm easily distracted, when no one else is awake, there's not much to do. I did a novel on a GO train, which is a commuter train that would take me into Toronto, Ontario for work. And I was on the train for about an hour and 45 minutes every morning, and no Wi-Fi back then. Now there is
Yeah.
Wi-Fi on the commuter trains, but no Wi-Fi was perfect. Open up my laptop and the battery would last just long enough for me to get like a chapter done or something. And that kind of structure is really important to me because I need to start when I start my day off getting stuff done, not opening email, not doing anything. And I purposely try not to get distracted by all the other things in my life.
Yeah.
Try to go, okay, I put it on my calendar. I say, okay, between 6 and 7:30, I'm gonna write.
Yeah.
And I will occasionally dip out of it to go do research. But sometimes the research that is supposed to be 5 minutes takes 15 or 20 because I'm
Good on Wikipedia
distracted
hole.
like squirrel.
Yeah. There's a British comedian called Sarah Millican, and I was listening to her podcast recently, and she was talking about how she used to do exact same thing, go into work early and just use the work computer to like get her
Yeah.
like stand up routine set up.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah, yeah. When I worked for Kobo, I would go in super. I would get in there like an hour and a half before anyone. But when I started driving in, I had to. If I otherwise, I'd be stuck in traffic for 2 hours. And
yeah.
it could be a 45-minute drive if I left at. I was leaving at 5:30 in the morning, and then the people didn't get there till 8. So I'm there from 6:30 till 8, and so I could get some writing done, but I could also actually even get other work done before other people
Yeah.
showed up because the work I needed to do thinking work and then I managed a team. So my team weren't there yet. Well, my team in Europe, I had a couple, two or three team members overseas, so they were online, so I could communicate with them. But then once the local team came into the office, my job was pretty much caring for them, and
Yeah.
so the thinking work couldn't happen when other people were around.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Eat the Frog's a great book for people, because people love that sort of productivity porn type stuff. So Eat the
Yeah,
Frog's a great book if you want to do that sort of thing.
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the recommendation.
Um, so let's go into a couple of your non-fiction books, and I wanted to talk a bit about Kobo especially. So
Yeah.
you got Wide for the Win and Killing It on Kobo, two of the best books I think around that topic.
Oh,
Now,
thank
most of
you.
the people we speak to, well, most people I speak to anyway, are like mostly selling on Amazon. I know that
Yeah.
is like pretty obvious. It's like, it's probably the biggest, easiest place to sell on. But basically the output of the books is, or the outcome of the books is, that you should be actually trying to go wider and also think about other platforms like Kobo. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Kobo, because it might be a bit new
Yeah,
for some
yeah,
people?
sure. I mean, so Amazon, no doubt about it. Amazon's the world's biggest bookstore, and it primarily dominate in the U.S. and the U.K. market. It's
Yeah.
huge. Kindle. I mean, even I remember I was at London Airport, and it didn't say put your e-readers away. It said put your Kindles away. Like the way the escalator used to be a brand name, and now it's just all moving staircases are escalators,
Oh,
right? I
right.
mean, so
I didn't know
it's
that one,
like
but
whoa.
yeah.
But there are some countries around the world where they use Kobo in the same way that they use Kindle to mean
Right.
ebook reader. And Kobo, born here in Canada, was Canada's answer to the Kindle. And Kobo partners with retailers around the world. So, for example, Mondadori in Italy, and Fnac in France, and Bol in the Netherlands, which in Bol is Amazon sized in
Yeah.
the Netherlands. And so
Right.
Kobo is in more countries around the world than even Amazon. And so the whole, and the other thing too is Kobo is only it's only about reading. I was going to say ebooks, but they got into audiobooks a few years ago. So it's only about reading. The
Yeah.
whole experience is not about going and buying a refrigerator or batteries or anything else that you need, like the everything store. So it's the only major company that's worldwide that's focused on reading, right? Amazon is the everything store. Google and Apple are primarily tech companies selling devices
Yeah.
and software. And so Kobo is the only other one. Like there's Barnes and Noble, but it's limited to the US. And Kobo's the only company that's really focused on just reading. It's
Right. Okay.
primarily about reading. And they also have some great partnerships. So with Overdrive, which is a library distributor, you can get your books right into Overdrive via Kobo Writing Life, the self-publishing platform, and that's just an easy pathway into the other markets. I also leverage like draft to digital for distribution as well when you don't want to go direct to some other platforms, to also get into other library platforms. And the thing about Wide is my version of Wide is not just Amazon versus five other retailers.
Yeah.
My version of Widen is very inclusive of all the options. Working, and I do work with traditional publishers for some of my books, but selling direct and taking advantage of things like Patreon and Kickstarter
Yeah.
and other methods of storytelling that go way beyond just putting your book up on a retailer. Because I think we have an opportunity as writers to directly connect with readers like no other phase in the history of writing and publishing.
Yeah. Yeah, that Kickstarter stuff's really interesting. I've spoken to a couple of people now. Kevin Anson was one of them. Kevin J. Anson, sorry, was one of them I spoke to. He's releasing his newest book on Kickstarter. Really interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but with Kobo, compared to like in terms of like royalties, distribution, and that sort of thing, compared to Amazon,
yeah.
what's that like?
Well, actually, it's better. So
Yep.
Kobo Writing Life is the self-publishing platform. Now, I was hired by Kobo in 2011 to come up with a solution for self-publishing, and in 2012, in the summer of 2012 at Book Expo America, we launched Kobo Writing Life, which
Yes.
which was what I think was the first author-centric, beautiful, user-friendly. So Smashwords had been around from the beginning. I'd used it as an author, KDP and Smashwords I'd used, but Kobo Writing Life was better and friendlier and easier to use and to navigate. And I think that's because it was designed by a no, oh, I mean I'm the non-tech user. The tech guys did all the hard work, but I'm not a technical guy, so I needed it to be simple. Um, even looking at the contracts and stuff like that. I mean, the contract, I looked at all the contracts and then I put it in proper English for us humans, not lawyers. And then I had the lawyerify it as well. But then I had to help work with her to please simplify it. Nobody reads the terms, but it was important for me that the terms be relatively understandable
Yeah.
for the layperson. But so the other thing too is and Kobo set the standard that there's no cap at $9.99. So with KDP, you have a price window of $2.99 to $9.99 to get your 70%. Now Kobo started the trend, I believe, of not having a price cap.
Yeah.
And none of the other major retailers have a price cap. Amazon's the only one that forces you to make your book cheap.
Yeah.
Like inexpensive. The other thing too is here's the other thing people don't know is Amazon never actually gives you 70%. They say they're going to give you 70%, but they never give you 70% because penalize you based on the size of your ebook because they have the whisper, like they have a free Wi-Fi that they provide so you can always stay connected on your Kindle,
Right.
and
Okay.
the author pays for that
Right.
because they take the depending on the file size of your EPUB,
Yeah.
they take whatever. I was actually looking at a book recently, and I think I'm making 62% from Amazon, not 70% because of my file size. So,
Right.
um,
Wow.
so yeah, you always get the 70% so long as you don't price below 2.99
Right.
on
Okay.
Kobo.
And so your books, I'm guessing, are all published on Kobo. But they're also on Amazon too. If
Yeah,
you are going
yeah.
to,
So I will
sorry, go on.
publish directly to Amazon. I usually publish directly to Kobo because I'm a little bit partial to it. I am Canadian, and Kobo is more popular here in Canada than Kindles. It'd be more
Right.
likely if you see somebody on the subway or on the bus or whatever. If you see them reading an ebook reader, it's more likely it's going to be a Kobo than a Kindle,
Yeah.
right? So not that
Amazing.
Kindles don't exist, but I got sidetracked here. What was I supposed to? What question was I supposed
No.
to answer?
Oh no. Is we're talking about you publish your books on Kobo.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I
but
go
also on
direct to
Amazon as
those
well. Yeah.
two. I go direct to Google Play Partner Center, Google Books Partner
Yeah.
Center, and then I typically use Draft to Digital to get into Apple, Barnes and Noble, to Tolino in Germany, Viblio in France, and a whole bunch of library platforms as well.
Hmm.
So
Right.
so I tend to leverage four different platforms for distribution. Then I use BookFunnel for example, to deliver books directly to people who
Yes.
buy stuff directly from me.
Book funnel's amazing. Yeah. I'm chatting to the guy soon, I think.
Good,
But
good.
the
You're
guys
gonna
from,
love that. Damon's just fantastic.
yeah, really good. So if you are publishing on Amazon and Kindle, is there anything you need to bear in mind or any rules that you need to follow in order to be published on both?
Yeah, so a couple things I think that are really important is, I mean, I never check off the select KDP select box, which makes your books exclusive, because if you do, you're locked in for 90 days and you cannot sell your ebook anywhere. It can't be available on any other retailer, can't be available in libraries. You definitely can't sell it yourself. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing is for authors who have series or they have larger books or maybe nonfiction academic books, and you don't want it to be below 9.99 with a box set, for example, on Kobo, on Google, on Apple, on Barnes and Noble, I can have let's say it's 6 books in a series, and they each sell for $5 US. We're both not in the US, but we probably speak US a lot because the
Yeah.
industry is driven by a lot of major retailers. So that would be 6 times 5 is 30, right? That was what the books would cost on their own. So making that book available for $21.99 is a good deal. But at Amazon, you're going to get penalized and they're going to give you 35%, but every other retailer is going to give you 30. So when I do the big box sets where the price is going to go beyond 9.99, I don't put that box set on Amazon.
Yeah.
You can still buy all my books separately. And Amazon
Yeah.
does make it so easy. They have a great, a page where you can click one button and buy all the books, and they usually offer some sort of discount. So they do that work for me. I'm not penalizing Amazon customers, but I would be penalizing myself if I put that $21 book up on Amazon. So those big expensive books I publish everywhere except Amazon. Again, I'm not removing any content it's not available to Amazon customers. It's just not available in that particular price package format.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. When you now with you are obviously working with Kobo a bit, so because you set up Kobo's Writing Life.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. I worked there for 6 years. Yeah, I left Kobo 2017. I still love them to death, but I still use the platform.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the Kobo Writing Life?
What is Kobo Writing Life?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is like Kindle Direct Publishing. So KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, is where you publish on Amazon. If you go to KoboWritingLife.com, or if you go to Kobo.com and you scroll down to the bottom where you look for self-publishing, you'll find the portal into Kobo Writing Life. So it is just the direct portal. It's a dashboard. It is a beautiful experience. You can convert your Word document for free. I mean, the conversion tool is not as good as Draft to Digital's or Amazon's, for example, but it's pretty decent if you've never done it and you don't want to like take the EPUB. You can make an EPUB on Draft Digital, download the EPUB, and then load it to Kobo, for example.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love the most about the dashboard, and this is on the classic dashboard, which you still have access to, is it was the first retailer to show you a map of the world and where in the world your book sold, because Kobo is so international.
Right.
And so obviously Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the Netherlands, Italy, Spain, all of these countries, you can see, wow, I primarily sell most of my books in the UK and in the US on Amazon. But then if I want to reach outside, it's Kobo and Apple, most likely, and Google, where I'm going to reach audiences outside. And again, even smashwords.com, which you can get to through Draft to Digital. Smashwords, again, was the first platform that was available in every country in the world, and Amazon's not. It's only available in about maybe 20, 25
Yep.
countries,
Right.
which is pretty good, but it's not the whole world. So there are customers out there that aren't going to find your stuff. And I think I know the folks who created Draft to Digital were inspired by the Kobo Writing Life dashboard and
Yep.
how simple and intuitive it was. So they set about to make a platform that was just as intuitive. So that was I mean it's a real honor when you've designed and created something and somebody else mimics it, because imitation is the most sincere form of flattery.
Yep. Definitely. Now, you also do a lot of consulting alongside your writing at the same time. So, what sort of consulting would people want to be hiring you for?
So, I mean, I will basically, I love focusing on mindset. I love focusing on setting and understanding your goals, your target audience, and plans, and working with authors on better understanding the business of writing and publishing. There's a few things I won't do. Is I'm not going to read somebody's manuscript and advise them. I'm not a good developmental editor. So
Yep.
that's not my forte. I'm not gonna be able to help you with that. I'm a slow reader too, so it's gonna take forever anyway. So you may as well go with somebody who's good at it. And then the other thing I don't do is, while I advise on marketing and promotion strategies and stuff like that, I don't market for you. Like, I'm
Yep.
not gonna go and say, "Oh, I'll do an Amazon ad for you." No, no. So those are some of the things I don't do, but I do love working with authors and just kind of getting inside where they want to be and what they want to do and advising them. And the thing that frustrates me the most about this industry is this isn't a case of, oh, I did it, you can do it too. Because the one aspect, no matter, and I work with authors where I look at their stuff and they're saying, hey, I've got this is my product. I've got the series. I've been publishing it for a few years, and I need to see where I'm going wrong. And I look at what they've done. I look at the covers; they're completely on point for the genre. I look at the descriptions and the sales copy; it's magnificent. I look at the reviews they've received from the people who love their stuff. I look at everything they're doing. I look at the price points. I look at the structure, the release strategy. Is it killing them? Like, are they on a treadmill? They're not going to be able to sustain in the long term. And I go, I can't find anything wrong with what you're doing. You just have to keep doing it, because the one thing we can't control is that luck, right? You can have like a dozen authors all doing the same thing, writing the most magnificent books. They're polished, they're edited, they're perfect, and one of them gets lucky and is suddenly a 6 and 7 figure author because something that they couldn't control happened. And I think what frustrates me a lot is sometimes somebody where that happens, they make the mistake of thinking, oh, it was that thing I did just before I got successful, so now I'm going to sell that to everyone as the
Yeah.
one magic bullet it's going to change everything. Well,
Yeah.
I've been in the book industry since 1992, and I've been writing for, I mean, 40 years. And fortunately, I've never had that magic bullet stroke of luck. I've had a long, slow, steady, continually increasing and sometimes decreasing as it comes and goes, the territory. So I recognize the value of persistence, patience, and practice as three of the hallmarks of
Yeah.
success for authors.
Yeah. Brilliant. And so, with marketing, are there any particular marketing tactics that you've been using recently that have been particularly successful?
Yeah, so the tactics that I use that tend to work the best tend to be a temporary price drop, 99 cents or free, through the paid promotion newsletters like BookBub, Written Word Media, Fussy Library, like all of those various platforms
Yep.
that are available, and the wide ones, not the Amazon only ones. That's a tactic that works really, really well. Free first in series is something that still works. I tend to only do it in limited chunks. I don't try not to do perma free as well, because I do know from my work at Kobo that most people who take a free book will never open it. It's a
Yep.
confirmation bias thing. It's like, I'm going to grab it because it's free, but I don't care.
I
But
can
if I had to
confirm that
pay at
that is
least
true.
99 cents, at least
Yeah.
99 cents, confirmation bias is going to be more likely to read it because
Yep.
I actually had to invest in it. So you don't get as many people downloading it, which gets us all excited because we trend and, oh, I'm in the top 10 or I'm number one. Who cares if nobody reads it? Because
Yep.
basically, the stats show that less than 3% of people who ever download a free book read it in the first 6 to 9 weeks. So you have to remember that. So regularly doing the promotions sometimes reminds them they already have the book on their Kindle or their Kobo or their Nook or whatever they're reading it on. The other thing that I think a lot of writers miss is they get so excited about wanting to get into the selling part and the marketing that they forget that they should be marketing to a very unique, exclusive group. And I'll give you an example, a personal example. With my horror titles, I recognize that horror is not everyone's cup of tea. It's nowhere near as popular. I mean, not even in the same universe as romance and
Yeah.
mystery and stuff like domestic thrillers and stuff like that that appeals to a much broader audience. So I've got a very, very narrow audience. I travel with a skeleton, for example, Barnaby Bones. So I've got Barnaby Bones beside me. So you come to a bookshop and you see me sitting there with a skeleton, and I got my skull shirt on and whatever. If you're not a horror guy, you know to avoid making eye contact with the crazy bald guy, right? You know that's not your cup of tea. You're off. You're like, okay, good. I got my note. This is not for me. But for people who love the macabre, they come rushing over. It's like a beacon. It's like, come on
Yeah.
in. I'm your guy. I got you covered here. This is your cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I think focusing on the niche more and letting like just focusing on that area that if I go to a conference and somebody comes in and says, hey, tell me about your books. And it's like, well, what do you like? What do you, because I do write a lot of different things, nonfiction, true ghost stories. I have urban fantasy. I have horror. I have books for writers as well, right? So I have,
Yeah.
and even just sort of
You're
Twilight Zone,
wide.
sort of, yeah. And I even have some family friendly stuff, just speculative fiction. So they tell me what they like. If they say, "Oh, I really like historical romance," I'm like, "Well, tell you what, you're wasting your time talking to me." But, and this is an important aspect that writers forget about. We're all in this together. It's like I don't have any historical romance. Like the closest I get to history is my true ghost story books because you can't tell a good ghost story without history. But if you want historical romance, oh my God, I got a friend. I was chatting with her earlier today. She's at the table just over there in the corner there. You got to go talk to her. She has the best
Yeah.
as well. Because here's the thing about that. What I did is I helped that reader connect with the right writer instead of me, instead of making a single sale that's she's never going to read and she's probably going to have a bad taste in her mouth. Connect her to the right person. And then maybe if she's talking to another friend who goes, yeah, I'm really looking for something spooky and scary and something great for Halloween. And she's like, oh, I was talking to the bald guy with the skeleton over there. Go see him. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that's indirect marketing by providing value to a reader that has nothing to do with your books.
Yeah.
And I think we get so hung up on I want to sell my books, I want to sell my books that we forget it's really about pleasing the reader and giving the reader something of value. And if we
Yeah.
can focus on the reader first when we think about our marketing, we're more likely to get a win. Even if it's not a short-term win, but the longer term win.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. And I love that you dress for the job that you want, really digging into that horror
That's
look.
right. Yeah. And a lot of people go, but you're so nice. I'm like, yeah, it's therapy. I just put all of my anger and everything into the horror.
Yeah. Also, you don't know me that well, so I might not be as nice as I look.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like,
Well, thanks so much for today. I think, yeah, people can get loads out of listening to this today. Now, I think if people want to get in touch to speak to you about your consulting, where's the best place to get in touch with you?
yeah, if you go to markleslie.ca, there's actually a thing that says consulting, and I'll do a free 20 minutes with anyone. You book a Zoom session, and if we can answer your questions and solve your problems in 20 minutes, I am so happy because
Wow.
maybe I saved you endless hours of pain, or worse, having to pay for something that you're not sure of. And then if you like me and I've offered you some useful advice, then I do charge for hour-long sessions, and we can do a longer term work together.
Great. Yeah, that's so generous to offer the free 20 minutes. And that's just like through your website, markleslie.ca, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And then you're also on Readsy as well. So a lot of, you've got to be good to be on Readsy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I think I put a pause on the Reedsy only because I had way too many tire kickers, and it took me a lot of time because when someone put up an RFP, I actually looked in, and I probably spent 45 minutes trying to come up with something custom for them, and I realized I was wasting hours and hours, and most of the people were just kicking tires and weren't really serious, and I was like, I don't have time for that, unfortunately. So it's easier for me to give people 20 minutes of my time. than it
Great.
is to waste time coming up with something for them and then not getting a gig out of it.
Great. That's really good. With your next book, so what's your next projects you've got coming up that you're working on
Well,
doing?
I've got a book in hand. Is my next nonfiction book that's coming out for writers. It's basically the power of actual physical product, and getting those physical products into customers' hands, whether it's through online retailers selling directly on your website, or doing a lot of in-person events. And then, of course, I've got the 20th anniversary of One Hand Screaming launching in October of 2024, and I'm really excited because I'm digging back into my roots. There's a collaborative beer called One Hop Screaming that a local brewery is doing, and we're launching the beer and the book together. So
Yeah.
October is, of course, my favorite month of the year. Halloween is my favorite month of the year, I should say.
Yeah. It's not quite so bad in the UK. We only have a couple of days of it, but I was in the US once for Halloween and it was completely
Yeah.
nuts.
Well, most people only take it seriously like the couple days before, but I start taking it seriously the minute August is over. Okay, Halloween mood.
Yeah, this is your spring break. It's like the big time
Yeah,
of the year for you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for today. It's been a really great session. I think people have got loads out of listening to it.
Yeah,
Just the one
thanks,
last
Teddy.
question we've got is, what's the one book that you recommend that everyone should be reading?
Yeah, yeah. There's a book that I recommend, particularly for writers as well. Jane Friedman wrote this book called The Business of Being a Writer. And what I love about Jane Friedman is she knows the traditional publishing industry really, really well, but she also knows the self and indie publishing industry very well. She's one of the very few people in the world, I'd like to say I'm one of them, who understands both sides really, really well. And
Yeah,
Jane is absolutely brilliant. And her book, The Business of Being a Writer, is a phenomenal book for writers to completely understand the industry. She is, I believe, very soon, I think this year, the second edition is coming out imminently if it's not already out. And I can't wait to get my hands on it because even though I read the first edition, I'm going to consume the second edition so quickly. So that is a fantastic book. I remember listening to it going, wow, somebody who actually gets all angles as opposed to just a siloed piece of the industry.
really great tip. I don't know that book, so that's something I'm definitely gonna be able to put on my list now.
Yeah.
But
Good.
yeah,
I'm glad.
thank you so much for today. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Teddy. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye.